Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
On today's episode of Conversations with Azu, we'll be talking about a Middle East war that has shaken the world. I'm talking about Israel and Iran. And this conversation, I always have it with Mr. Azu Ishekwele. Good day,
Thanks
sir.
for having me again, Nafisat.
Yes,
It's a
sir.
pleasure to be here.
So, on his column this time around, he talked about Iran, not what we thought it to be. What do we think Iran is?
Oh, great question. So, for years, we in the minds of many people, and I'm not an exception to that, obviously. We always thought of Iran as one of the giants of the Persian Gulf and of the Middle East. A giant in the region, quite obviously, not without a basis. If you go way back, 542 BC, either at the time of Darius or Cyrus. These were great kings. There was a particular one, quite famous, King Cyrus. It was called King Cyrus the Great.
Yes.
And King Cyrus the Great, of course, was at that time the leader of Persia, which is modern day Iran.
Yes.
And his kingdom stretched as far as Egypt. So for that and for many reasons, because also of Iran's advances, especially in the early days in terms of science, in mathematics, and so forth and so on. So quite obviously, many of us grew up and to think of it as one of the greats, and indeed at the time it was one of the greats of the Persian Gulf. And also in terms of numbers of populations, currently around 92 million or so.
Yes.
It's the largest in terms of population in that region, honestly. So there are many reasons, not without a reason, that we have always thought
about it as a giant.
Yes.
You made a lot of comparison, and as you've mentioned, in terms of size, in terms of even the population,
yes, land size,
especially
population.
when you put Israel and Iran side by side.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you describe them as a David and Goliath case.
Obviously, yes. For both in terms of population, land size, and the idea of Iran that we had in our head, it just looked like a matchup between David and Goliath. Correct.
Looking back to history and the thought of David and Goliath in my head, and this war that is going on right now, what do you have in mind to have described it that way?
Well, we have seen just about today is, this started on the 12th of June.
Yes.
Today is 20th. So we've seen about just 8 days of hostilities, of open hostilities between Israel and Iran. But it just didn't start today. It has been, especially since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel and killed about 1,200 in that attack, and also took about 250 Israelis hostage, including, of course, people from a few other countries. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had made it clear from that day that it was coming for Iran, because he believes that Israel believes, obviously, that Iran is actually the kingpin behind most of the trouble in that region, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or it was also a major supporter of Assad of Syria at the time. So, but it has built up gradually. It was not just a sudden, swift attack. Over time, we have seen it escalate until what we had on the 12th of June. So, not a huge surprise, but I think the surprise, in fact, was or has so far been the Iranian response to this Israeli attack.
Is the Israelites talking about their response? You made mention of how Israel attacks has killed over 14 scientists.
Yes.
And even the military personnel of Iran.
Yes.
And you also made mention of how a leaked intelligence report from the White House stated that the spiritual leader would have been killed in one of the attacks.
Yes.
Are we looking at a situation where Iran has lost not just its military but intelligence touch when it comes to power?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, it's interesting. Of course, there's been that there's been a great talk about this not just being a war between Israel and Iran, that it's a proxy war, that Israel is fighting for the US, that it's actually the US and Israel on one side, and then the Iranians on the other. But whatever, however you like to look at it, it's clear that if you look at military capability, if you are not looking at land size, or you are not looking at population, if you're looking at some other critical factors or metrics to measure power, in terms of intelligence, the Israelis have shown since, especially since October the 7th, since after October the 7th, they've shown a tremendous capacity to use intelligence in a way that I'm sure that most people are amazed.
Are not aware.
They are attacking not just from outside some of these places. They're attacking also from inside, from within. And it's been amazing, the use of intelligence and modern technology, especially precision targeting, in many cases, not in all cases, to fight the battle. Israel has quite clearly had an upper hand over Iran, and there are reasons for this also, because since 2015, at least, Iran has been under severe sanctions, and has also therefore not been able to get the sort of resources it needs to modernize its military, also to modernize its infrastructure in general. It's been struggling since.
Talking about Iran's struggle, and also talking about the war being a proxy, you've mentioned the thought of Israel fighting for US. And then a lot of other people have argued that, what if France comes in?
It's a bit,
and then we have Russia and China on the other side too.
No, it's a bit more complicated than that. Of course, France has taken very strong exceptions at the activities of Israel, especially its activities in the attacks on Gaza, and the hindrance to allowing humanitarian access to. And there's actually been serious, to use the words, there's been a humanitarian catastrophe in what is happening in Gaza, principally because of the intransigence, of Netanyahu, and that's what France has been appalled by, and France has called Israel out, and also I think Britain to a certain extent. But that does not suggest remotely that France, in a dispute, in the conflict between Israel and Iran, that France will side with Iran is very unlikely. And you mentioned two other potential supporters. You mentioned China, and you also mentioned Iran.
Russia.
I'm sorry, you also mentioned Russia. Well, China is not in a mood for any kind of conflict. I think China is more interested in how to rebuild itself to be the most significant economic power in this century. It's more interested in that. And Russia has its hand full already. The conflict or the war in Ukraine, the sanctions that Russia has suffered as a result of that war. Putin has his hands full a bit. Of course, there are about 200 or so Russians working at some nuclear sites in Iran. But Putin has told Israelis that they should be careful what they do about that. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I think, long story short, Iran is alone.
Yes, it looks like it's going to be alone for a very long time. Iran has defied the world over its nuclear program for a very long time. Yet there's no bomb, there's no conclusive progress, and no international confidence because of, like you said, the sanctions they are facing, and some of the thoughts, the possibilities that they are the kingpin behind Hamas, Hezbollah, and a whole lot of other anti-Western.
The instability in the Persian Gulf.
Yes. Do you think all along they were bluffing, and to think they didn't see that Hamas would go down?
Well, I think they didn't know, or they didn't see. I'm sure that events post October 7th had shown them clearly that they were back in the wrong horse, betting on Hamas. But regarding the question of its nuclear enrichment program. That's been on for at least 20 years now. I think I remember that it was in 2005 that the International Atomic Energy Agency first called out Iran and said, look, it was playing hanky-panky and hide and seek over its nuclear enrichment program. It needed to come clean. And I remember that a number of American presidents and some Western leaders have tried to mediate open and transparent access for inspectors, nuclear inspectors. But I don't know, perhaps the Iranian political leadership thought that the West was joking or was just grandstanding. And they played hide and seek for a long time. Israel has been saying, especially Netanyahu has been saying for many years now, that Iran is just a matter of months, if not weeks away. But of course, Netanyahu, you have to take what he says sometimes with a pinch of salt. But I think that if it has played the brinkmanship for too long, I believe that the reason why it's not come out plainly and transparently is because it was hoping to use its nuclear enrichment program as a leverage to get the West to ease sanctions. But that's not really, it has not worked the way it hoped. And with Trump in place, I think the election of Trump totally changed the entire game in that particular region.
I'm talking about Trump and mediation. This was a man who came out, I think, on the first missile attack from Israel to Iran and said he was aware that attack was going to take place. And now, about just 2 days ago, he is asking for peace talks.
No, you never know. The Trump that speaks in the morning may be well different from the Trump that speaks in the afternoon. And quite another Trump may just be speaking at night time. You never know which Trump is the Trump or the real Trump. But I think the latest in that direction is that he has said that he will decide openly whether America would be involved in direct attacks against Iran in the next 2 weeks. My guess, and this is only a guess, is that I think he's just creating a bit of window for Iran to see whether, especially for the Iranian leadership, to open up more transparent and then take a very clear decision about what it intends to do with its nuclear program. I will not be surprised. You remember that President Trump said he was giving 60 days. On the 61st day, the attack happened. He said he was giving 60 days for Iran to negotiate. And then on the 60th, he knew and he knows. And in fact, he was the one who said that Israel had told him that they had Khomeini over the barrel of the gun, and it was just going to pull the trigger, but he asked them not to do that. You never will know what Trump is going to do on or before those 2 weeks expire, but we'll have to wait and see.
Wait and see is what we are going to do on this side of the world. And as we are looking at what is going on in the Middle East, we're not just learning, but I hope that we are also trying to be better on this side of the world. And that's it on today's episode of Conversations with Azu. Make sure to like, share, and comment. See you on our next episode.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.